Good morning, everyone. It's such a honor and delight to be with you all again. I am, as I just said before, I'm so full the ability just to be in worship with you all again. Um, there is a lot to say and do in these times of uncertainty that Nicola has mentioned. And um, before I begin, I just want to give thanks for the energetic that surrounds us all. Um, I want to give honor to the indigenous land that I stand on today. I want to give reverence to those who have lost their lives to COVID-19. Today, I bring in the space of my ancestors who have gone before me, the ones through their actions supported the embodiment of Black resilience. And with that, I bring every conversation in this space that I've had with my Black brothers and sisters and beloveds who wanted their spiritual experience centered in their particular faith. I also want to acknowledge my spiritual home, where the Reverend Andrea Earl is a senior minister at Soul Center of Light. A powerful and engaging Black woman, I may add. I've learned a lot from her. And I also just want to acknowledge my friends who have come here to be with me today and to worship with us today. I really appreciate you all. Thank you for coming. Um, the hermeneutic that I'm going to be looking at today is a hermeneutic that can see white supremacy as being deadly and toxic. I'm always listening to what theology what theology needs to be cleaned out while incorporating sacred text, which supports my journey. The sermon today is influenced by my cousin Red, who died of COVID. It's influenced by the Dr. Jeremiah Wright, Martin Luther King, my Black experience as a Black queer woman growing up in the former plantation, and so many voices who spoke to me in my preparation. I'm very fully aware that it's Black History Month. I'm very fully aware that is a lot of work to do as relates to what is the church's role around economic and social justice. Um, and so whenever I'm at First Congregational, I'm also aware of the tape recording. So this message is also to the world. Um, so what are we going to talk about today? So in that spirit, I want to discuss with you today Black thought, Black theology, Black prophetic tradition. It's this kind of understanding that centers on the lived experience of thinking, feeling, acting the Black body. It's what Jesus describes as the least of these. I will suggest to you today that the lived experience of the Black body is the North Star, the underfunctioning church around racism. Lived experience of the Black body is a practical theology which can lead the church out of the hermeneutical wilderness of racialized thinking and trauma, suggesting something else is possible. There is another world. Today, we are going to be using Dr. Howard Thurman's question he poses in Jesus and the Disinherited as a way to pivot to exploring the role of the church and Christianity in combating racism, its impacts in times of COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. We will also be using the text of St. John, as the writer tells us, we can't do light touching on suffering anymore. The church must acknowledge racial wounds, demanding accountability, transformation of white power and white privilege. So as we prepare our temples for the word, I will invite you to inhale and release and allow the Spirit to fall on us. My prayer is really a quote from Martin Luther King, who says, use me, God. Show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a purpose greater than myself. Ashe, amen, and so it is. The life of the theologian Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, a poet, a mystic, used religious expression to help ignite sweeping social change. His landmark book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was the first to state that Jesus Christ, who was born in poverty as part of a powerless minority, lived a life that spoke directly to Black Americans. In his book, Dr. Howard Thurman asked the following question that I'm rephrasing. What is the church? Why is it that the church is weak in dealing effectively with race and its impacts? Is it our religion itself? Is it our approach, the way we engage in community? To some extent, why is it so powerless to combat racism when there are folk, what he describes, with their backs against the wall? What I know as a Black queer woman is that racism has been a part of the theological foundation upon which this notion of genocide and conquest has been constructed. It's not news for some of us that the theological education has been a co-conspirator in this demonic design to conquer the world for Jesus Christ. This is a dominant worldview that many white theologians have inherited, a world in which they have told them that they are superior, the legacy they have committed to maintain. Almost all of the school literature, commentaries, Sunday school books, analysis of the biblical text supports a religious racism practices in houses of worship every Sunday taught in theological education. Dr. Renita Weems, the first Black female biblical scholar, puts a corrective lens on the Hebrew Bible, upsetting a lot of Bible-believing Christians when she describes her course on the sacred text, the text of not what God said, that what I will teach you what Israel said, what God said. He makes it very clear that the writers makes a justification of genocide and ethnic cleansing, whether in Canaan or the Promised Land. Spiritualities and religion of melanated people is a worldview. It's freed itself from the hermeneutical wilderness of normativity, and trauma. It demonstrates that another world is possible. Multifaceted existential essence begin in Africa. It's what Vincent Harding describes in his book, There is a River. Black traditions of enslaved Africans evolved and rebuked the dominant thinking of Eurocentric words and culture throughout the modern era. It was Black thought, Black theology, Black prophetic tradition, Black experience, what the people themselves were saying about themselves, not what outsiders looking in could describe from their distorted Eurocentric investigation. The oral and to some extent written works contain the chronological origins dating back from the 1600s to the 1800s. And it points us out of the wilderness of white supremacy, white privilege, exceptionalism. Sometimes we saw that in the mutiny aboard slave ships who cried, "Give us free." Sometimes we saw that in the recordings of runaways like Harriet Tubman. We saw that in rebellions like Nat Turner. We saw that in revolutions like Haiti of 1791. We saw that in the music, in the double entendre, the songs whose bodies were in bondage, locked in chains and on plantations, but whose spirits soared in freedom. We see that in the writings like Harriet Jacobs, or in the sermons that was told of the Black preachers when the slaves could steal away. It is that theology that is articulated in the narratives of the formerly enslaved Africans. It is this Black thought, this Black theology, this Black experience that points to the North Star and affirms another world is possible for the church. My formation of this was influenced by families of rural roots in Scottsville, Virginia. Black sacred music, Black testimony, call and response, and Black fellowship, Black love. Ceremonies and rituals were conducted in the hopes of maintaining a tribal unity and emphasizing trust in the faith. Life's experience accurately addressed the cultural melancholy, optimism, the entrapment, and escape of normalized oppression. My theological formation, later influenced by Katie Cannon and Kelly Brown Douglas and Loris Williams. Black scholarship like Audre Lorde and James Baldwin, further influenced by the practical theology of Black grass roots organizing of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Annie Lou Hamer. Contemporaries like Phil Marshall, Turha Ock, activist and co-leader of the Anti-Terror Project, Pat Brooks, Oakland Council member, Gerald Fife. I witnessed my personal Black prophetic tradition grow, be enriched exponentially by the interdisciplinary approaches of my elders and scholars, like the Combahee River Collective, Emily Crenshaw's work on intersectionality, Cornel West, Kianga Imada Taylor. There were challenges, cooperation and collaboration among these Black folks in Black experience. Dr. Jeremiah Wright suggests Black thought, Black theology, Black experience, Black prophetic tradition has more value, more validity, is sometimes misguided and often racist thought of the theology found in the accepted Western canon, Eurocentric traditions we practice on Sunday. He suggests that this form of philosophical inquiry explores the problem of human existence and centers voices on the lived experiences of the thinking and the feeling and the acting of the Black body. It's these voices will lead the way for a church who is weak in dealing effectively with race and its impacts. It's these voices who time and time again tell us that there's nothing wrong with Black bodies. This is the system that has been designed to fill us. A system designed to rob and kill and exploit Black bodies. And a certain Christianity we practice today is a co-conspirator. Voices from the slave trade for sugar and cotton plantations. Voices from the bottom of the oceans of the Middle Passage. Voices from the trees bearing strange fruit. Voices from the incarcerated Black body for profit. Voices from those who were shot by police or had knees on their necks or sleeping in their cars or in their homes. Voices from gender violence, voices from domestic violence, voices from Black essential workers on the front lines without protections or fair wages. Voices from the houseless, the homeless, and housing insecure. Voices from the poor, the demonized. Voices from what Jesus called the least of these. What their voice from the least of these are saying. What these voices from the least of these who have been deemed not fully human, with no soul, no mind, no rights, voices that the God of justice loves. Is this God, the Son said, it is, and as much as you have done it to me, you've done it to the least of these. That Jesus, who was born an unmarried, melanated, poor woman in a manger. He was born in an oppressed nation. He had hair like wool. What Dr. Alfred Smith describes that he was born as a Jew in oppressive Rome, he was an immigrant in Egypt. In the times of COVID-19 and Black Lives Matters, there's a mandate to listen to the voices of a theology that will help us to become what God created us to become, to clear the uncertainty, to be able to what God created us to be, what God made in his own image, that it may be revealed. What is the theological implication to all of this? The interlinear text of John 20:27. Jesus says, bring the finger of you here and see the hands of me, and bring the hand of you and put it into the side of me. Bring that finger of you here and see the hands of me. In order for Christianity, which seems weak, powerless, to deal radically and therefore effectively with the issues of discrimination and injustices, we must name wounds. We must look, we must listen, we must believe the wounds to prevent this weak approach to racism in the church. Believing involves reckoning, involves a confrontation with contemporary crucifixions, or else the church will remain anemic. Generally, the church as a whole refused to allow the Black experience to lead the way out of the racial and economic injustices. It is our duty to transform the sense of betrayal. We must turn to a Black theology. We must turn to a Black lived experience. We must turn to the Black prophetic tradition, because it must be reconciled. We must acknowledge them. You see, we have a doubting Thomas in us we must be mindful of. Incredulous Thomas, some would say. Thomas is representative of those who perform Eurocentric theology without the vital cord of connection. There is hope in recognizing and examining these wounds and begging for a theology that speaks to our weakness and our ineffectiveness and helps us to become what the God of justice has created in his image. This reference the Apostle Thomas, one who refused to believe that the resurrected Jesus had appeared to the 10 other disciples until he could see and feel the wounds received by Jesus on the cross. However, Jesus confronts Thomas with the force of his own request. The oppressive nature with which Thomas has been operating is exposed. It's turned back on him. It is to reveal the parts of himself that he does not want to see. Invitation to Thomas in this text has an element of confrontation. And in that, Thomas has to face his own complicity, a logic that devalues certain lives. But it is also reorients Thomas, what Dolores Williams calls work revaluing. Church, we have the work of revaluing to do. And in order for a change to come, Thomas will need as well to address his relationship to those wounds. There is a call to action. I want you to walk out here today, First Congregational friends and those listening to this tape, to create the intentionality of spaces that have committed to saying Black Lives Matter. The church must change in ways that eradicate the decentralized white power. The call to action is this. Oakland Council member Carol Fife, a Black woman, has asked us to demand that Mayor Schaaf apologize to the people of Oakland for lying and stoking racial truth and undermining our democracy. We have an incredulous Thomas the midst in our Oakland leadership. Some of you know, earlier this week at a press conference, Mayor Libby Schaaf, a white woman, responded to the very real pain of survivors of violent crimes with dog whistle racism, aimed at stoking anti-Black racism and increasing fear in support of a prop police budget. Schaaf misrepresented her administration's role in cutting needed services and did not address the ways her administration overstepped its role. This posturing is part of Oakland Mayor's ongoing attempt to silence and undermine the Black-led fund the police movement in Oakland and the growing multiracial, multi-sector governing coalition. Schaaf's comments were disrespectful to the survivors, Chinatown community, Black community, the Oakland community as a whole. Her statement spread misfortune and attempted to divide and conquer the Black and Asian community. We know narratives like this is not new. That around the country, we are seeing a recoiling and violent lashing out of white supremacy, threatened by the rise of a truly progressive, a truly justice-oriented, a truly God of justice, multiracial feminist leadership. That's what we are seeing here in Oakland too. Today, my call of action is to ask you to send a letter, Oakland City Mayor, asking them for an apology with a number of demands. As I close, as the opening said in the song, it will get better. God is here. It is ours to reclaim this truth. It will set us all free. Cultural change takes hold through consistency and repetition. And we know this, not just on MLK Day or Black History Month, every day. It takes courage, accountability, and transparency. America's history of oppression is ours to bear, church, and to reconcile with our history of freedom fighting and justice. We must respond to this ongoing injustice, church, in our cities and at our borders, as our ancestors have, with unyielding resolve, unyielding moral conviction, and decisive action together in church community. Today, you have heard the voice of one who has the spiritual language of the oppressed, not the oppressor, urging you to center the pain and humanize our stories. Creation, telling and passing on of new stories of hope, of agency, and of a God of justice is crucial to the new church. Thank you, everyone. Amen.
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 Hallelujah.
Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
Cherri.
Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
Cherri.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.